My parents say I had a car accident on purpose because I was jealous that my sister was giving birth. But now the whole family knows the truth, and it's not good for them. A couple of years ago, when I was in college, I had a horrible car accident when a drunk driver crashed into my car. I ended up in the hospital for several weeks. I broke a leg, and it took me a long time to learn to walk again, even longer for all the scars to disappear. Although it has been almost 3 years since the accident, I'm still very careful when driving. Even though the accident wasn't my fault, what I remember most from that time is that my family refused to come visit me because my sister had gone into labor. Here's a curious fact. I was actually on my way to surprise my sister by driving to the hospital where she was going to give birth when I had the accident. It was only a few weeks before my graduation, and my university campus was just a few hours from my hometown, so it was pretty convenient for me to travel back and forth. When I got the call from my parents saying my sister had gone into labor and was being taken to the hospital, I decided to surprise her, so I borrowed a friend's car to go there. However, on the way, I had the accident, and I was rushed to the nearest hospital. It was mainly my friends who were there for me at that time because my parents were busy with my sister, which I totally understood. What I didn't like was that even a few days after my sister had given birth, my parents didn't bother to come see me. I called them several times after the accident, even though it was pretty painful for me to do so. But the only thing they kept asking was if my parents had called or come to visit, and it disappointed me every time. Finally, about a week after the accident, my parents called me. Even then, it wasn't to check if I was okay, but just to ask why I had been calling so often, since they had been ignoring my calls because they were with my sister and her baby. I was shocked by how cold they were being with me, especially given the situation, but I still decided to ask them how my sister and the baby were doing. They told me my sister was fine and that my niece was doing well, but they didn't ask how I was doing, even though I was pretty sure they already knew I had had an accident since my friends told me they had informed my parents by every possible means. When they didn't ask, I decided to give them the information myself. I told them I had had an accident and had been trying to reach them for the past few days to tell them. At that point, I was at least hoping for a reaction, but they simply told me they already knew I had had an accident and that my friends had informed them. That was it. They didn't bother to say anything else. I got really upset and ended up asking them if they couldn't even pretend to care about me. That's when they told me they hadn't answered my calls and messages on purpose because the coroner days that they didn't want to talk to me. They thought it was more important to be with my sister while she was giving birth than to be with me after an accident I had caused. I couldn't understand what they were talking about because, as far as I knew, I wasn't the one who was drunk. It was the other driver's fault. But they said they weren't referring to that. They told me I had caused the accident by choosing to drive alone and that it had been very irresponsible of me, especially since it was pretty late at night and I had no reason to be out driving. When I told them I was actually going to the hospital to be with my sister, they said that it wasn't necessary for me to do something like that and that I had no one else to blame for the accident but myself. It was really horrible and insensitive of them to say something like that, and I got really upset, so I ended up hanging up without saying another word. Later, I found out that when the people who found me at the accident scene called 911, they first contacted my parents, but they refused to come and even asked not to be contacted about it anymore. Then they contacted the university authorities because I had my ID on me, and that's how my friends found out. It was even more disappointing to me because although the emergency services had contacted my parents to tell them their daughter had had an accident, they didn't even bother to go. Their only response to the whole situation was to blame me for what happened, even though I was just trying to be there for my sister and the family. After that incident, I realized that even though I wanted to be there for my family didn't care about being there for me. Not even my sister bothered to get in touch with me after that. Over the last 3 years, I haven't had any contact with my family after that incident. I really gave up on them. Even before that, we had a normal relationship, but I always felt like they left me aside because of my sister's priorities. When I had my accident, my family showed me that. To be clear, I wasn't upset because they didn't abandon my sister during her labor to come see me. What hurt was that, even after my sister gave birth, They didn't think it was important to come see me. I didn't even expect my sister to visit me in the hospital because, obviously, it was impossible for her at that time. But it wasn't for my parents. And my sister had her fiancé and family to take care of her. I only had my friends. Fortunately, I was lucky enough to have friends who supported me throughout the process and helped me with my recovery. Even the funds for my treatment and other expenses were covered by them and their parents, and I'm still paying them back. But I'm so grateful for everything they did for me, and I don't think I could ever fully repay them. Even though it's been 3 years since the incident, my parents have made no effort to get in touch with me. Many family members have wondered why we no longer have a relationship, but I've had the courtesy of not telling them what happened. I guess we had an unspoken agreement to not talk about it with the rest of the family, and I've stuck to that. However, recently they decided to speak about it, and one of my aunts reached out to me after my parents talked about the incident, portraying me as the villain in the story. This happened a couple of weeks ago when my parents organized a family dinner at their house to celebrate my sister's promotion at work. While everyone was gathered, the topic of my distancing came up. After several back-and-forth exchanges, my parents decided to talk about it for the first time in 3 years because they no longer thought they needed to keep the secret from the family. However, when they told the story, they changed what happened after my accident. Some facts were true, like how I had planned to surprise my sister by driving to the hospital and how I had an accident on the way. However, after that, they said they hadn't been contacted and only found out about the accident a couple of days later. By then, too much time had passed and they were too busy with my sister and the baby to wonder why I hadn't reached out to them. They also said that when they finally found out about the accident, the first thing they did was call me, but I was very upset with them and refused to talk to them. That wasn't true. Then they said they had tried to reach out to me several times, but I always rejected their attempts, and eventually, they stopped trying. They painted the whole situation as a misunderstanding, presenting me as the villain who couldn't forgive them for not being there for me. My aunt, being the good Samaritan she is, decided to contact me, even though my parents had specifically told her not to talk to me about this because they didn't want to make a big scandal. But she knew the real reason they didn't want anyone to talk to me was that they didn't want me to find out that they had lied about what really happened. My aunt contacted me and said it had been 3 years since I last spoke to my parents, and that they missed me very much. She told me that I was missing the chance to be an aunt to my niece, and that she personally would never let that opportunity pass. She encouraged me to get in touch with my parents. I was very confused, so I called her, and she told me what my parents had said. I was shocked. They had changed the story to make me look selfish and presented themselves as the victims when, in reality, it had been the other way around. I was furious after hearing what they had told the family, so I decided to tell my aunt the truth. I told her that I was even willing to put her in contact with my friends, who had covered all my expenses, so she could verify what I was telling her. The true version of what had happened. My parents hadn't cared about me after the accident. They had been contacted, but they didn't want to be bothered at that time. I wasn't even mad at them for being with my sister as she was giving birth, and that was important. But what hurt me was that, after all of that, they didn't bother to come see me. When I clarified this to my aunt, she was very surprised and apologized for doubting me. I thanked her a lot for deciding to talk to me because, if she hadn't, I might never have found out what my parents were saying behind my back. After my conversation with my aunt, I guess the news of what really happened years ago started to spread. Many people began contacting me, telling me that what I did by telling the truth to my aunt was necessary, because otherwise, my parents might have gotten away with lying about the situation and making me look bad. Even many family members started to sympathize with me, saying that what happened to me was horrible and that my parents should never have treated me that way. It was unfair and undeserved. In some ways, I'm really grateful to my aunt because she made people hear my version of the story. Otherwise, my parents could have gotten away with it. However, this has now become a problem for me. After my parents found out I had spoken to my aunt about my version of events and that she had talked to other people about it, the rest of the family started distancing themselves from them. I really don't understand how this is my fault, because the only thing I did was tell the truth. That's it. In fact, it wouldn't even be accurate to say that I told the truth to the family. I only told my aunt the truth, and she decided to tell everyone else. Anyway, I'm being blamed for how the situation has unfolded because right now, no one in the family wants to speak with them, and practically everyone is ignoring them. This isn't good because in a couple of weeks, my sister is going to celebrate her daughter's 3rd birthday, and it will also be the 3rd anniversary of my accident. But what they're concerned about right now is that because the family has found out the truth, they believe no one will attend the birthday party. It's disappointing because my niece is surely excited about her birthday, and the whole family had been invited. However, no one has responded to the invitations yet, and some people have already declined without bothering to offer an explanation. So that's what's happening right now. Despite the fact that my family hasn't spoken to me in 3 years, this has made them contact me, and they've been trying to call me and send me messages constantly. I haven't answered any of their calls because I don't think it's important, but most of their messages accuse me of creating this situation on purpose to steal the spotlight from my sister. Apparently, my parents, even my sister, believe I'm doing this on purpose because I can't stand the fact that they chose to be with my sister while she was giving birth instead of being with me. They think this is my way of getting revenge. They even went so far as to say that they were sure I got in the car late that night on purpose because I wanted to be the center of attention, especially because I was jealous of my sister as she was giving birth and receiving most of the attention from the family, attention that I wanted for myself. It's such a horrible and disgusting thing to say. I can't even imagine thinking something like that about another person, no matter how much I might dislike them. The implication that I caused that accident on purpose because I wanted attention and sympathy from my family is just repulsive. On top of that, they're accusing me of seeking attention even now because they think that after hearing about my sister's promotion at work and how well her life is going, I couldn't stand it. So, according to them, I decided to bring up things from the past to paint them badly. I don't even understand why they would say something like that when they know exactly what they've been trying to do. They were doing exactly what they're accusing me of doing, and the hypocrisy of it all made me furious. Still, I managed to ignore all of my parents' messages and blocked their numbers once they started trying to contact me. But a couple of days ago, my parents decided to show up at my door. They told me I needed to fix the situation I had created because my niece was going to celebrate her birthday in a few days, and they couldn't let that be a disappointment for her. They demanded that I talk to my aunt and the rest of the family and tell them that everything I had said was a lie to make my parents look bad. When they showed up, demanding that I do this for them, as if they had any right to my help after everything they had done to me, absolutely nothing, that's when I really lost my temper. And this is probably where I could be at fault. When they showed up and started shouting outside my house, I obviously refused to let them in. I told them that if they didn't leave, I would call the police. I told them I had no interest in listening to their absurd requests, and that what they were asking of me was too much given that they had done nothing for me. When the threat of calling the police didn't scare them, I decided to open the door. I told them they needed to leave, and I even had my phone in my hand with the number dialed. But my dad told me he wasn't scared and that he knew I was just an attention seeker. He claimed that's why I'd worked so hard to ruin their reputation and that now I was trying to get revenge on my sister and her daughter in a nasty way. He said he wasn't going to let that happen and that I should use the phone to call my relatives and tell them the truth about what happened. Although I had been telling the truth, they wanted me to say their version of the truth, where they were the saints and I was the villain. They wanted me to tell people I had been lying. They wouldn't stop shouting at me, so I kind of lost it and exploded. I started pushing them out of my property. At first, they were just surprised that I got physical with them, but then they started fighting back. By then, I was so angry that I was out of control and kept pushing them until they were in the street. While they were in the street, I kept pushing them and yelled that I hoped a car would pass by and hit them and that no one would visit them in the hospital. I told them that maybe then they would finally understand how I felt years ago when they abandoned me after my accident. They seemed truly shocked by my outburst, and once I finished yelling, I decided to go back inside and ignore them. Luckily, they didn't bother me after that, but later my sister decided to call me. She told me that what I had done was excessive and that I shouldn't have even opened the door. She said I should have just called the police if I was that upset about them showing up. Apparently, what I did really traumatized my parents, and she believes I owe them an apology. I even felt bad for handling the situation so violently because that's not who I am. So am I the bad one for pushing my parents when they showed up at my house after 3 years of no contact? Here's the thing. I'll tell you why it's a big problem that I pushed my parents. It's not just the fact that it was a violent outburst and physical. It's also the fact that I'm a trained fighter in mixed martial arts. I'm not a professional by any means, but I am significantly stronger than both of them. The fact that I got physical with them was, of course, traumatic for them because it must not have been easy to handle, according to my sister. I even ended up hitting them, but that might have been an exaggeration on their part just to make me feel bad for them. Anyway, that's why it's a big problem, and I'm not sure if I owe them an apology or not. My sister is pretty convinced that I do, and she's told me she's going to press charges if I don't publicly acknowledge what I did and tell the whole family I had been lying. It seems wrong to me that she's threatening me like this, especially when she knows for sure that what I said was the truth. But I've stuck to my position and told her that if I end up apologizing, it will be because I truly feel sorry, not because I'm afraid of what she thinks might happen if she presses charges. Update: 2 days have passed since I posted here, and after reading the comments and opinions, I've decided not to apologize to my parents. I've also decided not to engage with my sister if she tries to contact me again, because it's clear she's as bad as they are. The only reason I hadn't been against her until now was because she had been kind to me when we were kids. But now, I'm pretty sure she has changed too. I was looking for a way to fix the situation because even though I know what my parents did, it's clear my niece isn't to blame for any of this. Thanks to everyone who commented on my post and shared their thoughts about the situation. At this point, I don't think apologizing to my parents is the right example. If I apologize, they will think they can intimidate me into staying quiet, but that's not going to happen again. They can't just get away with it and expect me to tolerate their behavior. They were the ones who showed up at my door, started threatening me, and refused to leave even when I told them I wasn't interested in interacting with them. If my sister decides to press charges, I'll just say I was provoked, and I'm pretty sure the punishment for pushing my parents won't be too extreme. It's not like they suffered severe injuries, and I was just trying to get them out of my property. I'm mentally prepared for everything, but the one thing I will not do under any circumstances is apologize to anyone, because I don't feel sorry at all. And that's it. Update 2. Apparently, today was supposed to be the big birthday celebration that my sister had planned for her daughter, but unfortunately, no one attended. At least no one from the family. I know this for sure because I spoke with my aunt, and she told me that literally, the entire family decided not to go after finding out what happened to me years ago. It wasn't just the fact that my parents refused to be with me when I had the accident 3 years ago, but also that, after all this time, they decided to lie about what really happened to look good and make me seem like the bad one. No one in the family liked that, and I'm really grateful that they decided to do the right thing. I got really emotional while talking to my aunt because she told me that if anyone else in the family had known about my accident, they would have been there to support me. But I chose to keep everything private. In fact, I deactivated all my social media at that time, and when people tried to reach out to me, I told them I was fine but never mentioned anything about the accident. So recently, many people didn't even know I had such a serious accident 3 years ago. It was a very dark time in my life, not only physically but also emotionally, and I really don't want to relive it. But I can't ignore the past either. While I was talking to my aunt about what happened years ago, I ended up crying, and I finally managed to release all the emotions I had been holding back for almost 3 years. She was very understanding, and she told me that the whole family thinks I'm very strong for going through all of that alone. She also assured me that, in the future, if anything happens, I now know who to call. I'm really grateful for the conversation I had with her and for her support during the past few weeks. Anyway, now that no one attended the party, I know my sister and our parents will be very upset, so I'm preparing for their reaction. To be honest, the only person I feel bad for in this situation is my niece. I've never met her and haven't had any interaction with her, but I know it can't be easy for no one to attend your birthday party. I'm sure her parents will do something to make it up to her, and since she's only 3 years old, I don't think she'll remember this in a few years. Update 3. It's been a week since my last update, and a couple of things have happened since then. The first and most significant is that my parents got back in touch with me. Since I had blocked them everywhere, they decided to create a new email account just to speak with me. They sent me an email saying they regret how they treated me 3 years ago, but honestly, at that time, they were all very stressed about my sister's delivery, and they were so focused on that they didn't pay attention to what I was going through. However, now, with time, they admit that at least they should have made the effort to come visit me. It was moving that they finally admitted they made a mistake, but honestly, at this point, it doesn't matter anymore. What's done is done, and they can't just say these things and undo everything. Maybe it would have been easier for me to handle if they had sent this email a few months after the accident, but they waited 3 full years and many confrontations to finally recognize that they were wrong and negligent. At this point, I've realized that their priority is my sister, not me, and I'm okay with that. I've made peace with everything, so their apology means nothing to me. The second thing they mentioned in that email was that they spoke with my sister and collectively decided not to press charges against me for what happened the other day. I guess good for them, but it wouldn't have made a difference for me even if they had decided to press charges. After we clarified things through email, I responded saying that I was okay and didn't want them to contact me again. They published a statement on social media where they said we had cleared things up and would appreciate if the rest of the family stayed out of this dispute, or whatever they want to call it, since everything was now over. I guess they just wanted people to stop judging them for what happened in the past, which is why they posted that statement. Otherwise, they wouldn't have even acknowledged it. The rest of the family showed them they were serious by not attending the birthday party, so I guess my parents decided to take it seriously as well. But of course, they still had to play the victim, which is why they published the statement in that tone. Anyway, I'm really relieved that all of this is over, and I can go back to my normal life now. Update 4. I'm back with another update because things between my relatives and my parents continue to evolve. After the public statement my parents made, claiming that they had resolved things with me, many family members began to contact me to ask if that was true or if it was just another lie from my parents. Honestly, I can't blame them for doubting it. My parents don't exactly have the best reputation when it comes to telling the truth, and most of the family knows that. So I had to explain to them what really happened. As you know, I accepted their apology, but at the same time, I asked them to stay out of my life. It's not that everything has been left in the past and now we're a big, happy family, as they tried to make it seem in that statement. I clarified that while I decided not to carry the resentment anymore and acknowledged their apology, I don't want or need them to be part of my life again. Many of my relatives were surprised, and to be honest, some were upset with my parents. From my perspective, most of them were already angry about what happened years ago, but now their anger seems to have grown. Not only was it painful what my parents did to me during that dark period, but now their apology seems to be seen as another selfish act on their part. Many believe the apology isn't genuine, that they only gave it to preserve their image and not lose the respect or sympathy of the family. Some told me they felt disappointed because they expected something more sincere from my parents. Others simply believe my parents have spent too much time playing the victim, and this latest move is just another effort to get away with it and look good publicly. It's pretty clear that their apology hasn't had the effect they were expecting. It seems to have only made things worse. On my part, I've tried not to get too involved in what other relatives decide to do or say. After all, I'm happy to have removed them from my life. Accepting the apology doesn't mean everything is forgotten, and although I no longer hold resentment, I'm not willing to open the door to them again. What I've made clear when people ask my opinion is that we shouldn't involve my niece. She's not to blame for the grandparents she got, and I don't think it's fair for her to pay for the mistakes of others. At the end of the day, she's still an innocent child, and I don't want her to get caught up in this family storm. Despite everything, the atmosphere in the family is still tense. Some relatives have stopped speaking to my parents directly, while others are still trying to maintain a more distant relationship. What surprises me the most is the number of people who feel betrayed, not only by what my parents did years ago, but also by how they've handled everything afterward. Sometimes it seems like their apology has caused more problems than solutions, which is ironic, considering their goal was probably the opposite. One thing I've noticed is that as the situation unfolds, I feel more and more relieved not to be involved in their drama. Before, all of this affected me deeply, but now I realize that I'm in a much healthier place emotionally. I'm not interested in being part of their games, nor do I want to keep participating in the toxic dynamics that used to be so common in our family. I don't know what decision the rest of the family will make regarding my parents. Some have already cut ties, while others are still evaluating how to handle the situation. That said, all I can do now is wait and see how things evolve in the coming months. Maybe the family will calm down. Maybe not. Either way, I no longer feel trapped in this cycle, and I think that's the most important thing. Update 5. I just want to share the decision the family has made regarding my parents, my sister, and my niece. I promise it will be brief. On one hand, the family has decided to turn their backs on my parents, and those who read my previous update will know why they did that, so I won't repeat it. What's positive, at least to some extent, is that they've decided to do something to make amends with my niece. Even though many in the comments mentioned that my sister is also guilty of all of this, my family has chosen to forgive her, and they've started inviting her to family events again. As you can imagine, my parents aren't included in these invitations, but the positive thing is that I am. The best part of all this is that I finally got to meet my niece. Although my relationship with my sister is still distant, at least I had the opportunity to be with my niece, and to be honest, it was a very special moment. I brought her a huge teddy bear, so big that I think it makes up for the gifts I never could give her before, or at least part of them. She seemed to really like it, and it was a small gesture that made me feel more connected to her despite everything that has happened.